Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the ROLI Seaboard Rise 49. This is a monolithic piece of anodized aluminium controller keyboard with a very unusual twist. It's essentially a sort of squidgy foam-like control surface with a keyboard type interface, but allows you to play MIDI in multi-dimensional touch. It's a format of MIDI that allows you to treat each note as a separate event. So pressing a key on the keyboard and another key and another key, you can express the sound very effectively. It gives you a lot of expression. It's an unusual thing. This is based on ROLI's Seaboard Technology. It's called SEA Technology, S-E-A, and it's a sort of, here you've got this kind of backlit, what looks like a kind of gel, and this gel is at the core of their technology, and it's SEA technology. It's called sensory, elastic and adaptive. Highly precise, information-rich and pressure-sensitive. It enables seamless transitions between discrete and continuous input and captures three-dimensional gestures while simultaneously providing the user with tactile feedback. I would concur. It's quite unusual. I suppose the closest thing that you might have to something like this is going to be the Roger Linstrument or the Harken Continuum. The difference between this and those ones is this is a more familiar starting point. As you can see, we've got the black keys are delineated by these white markings, and the black keys, you can't probably see them here. If I switch to this view and just put a light across it, you'll be able to see that this surface is contoured. So each of the keys has this contoured feeling with a slightly raised black key. This is all slightly different to what was on the original Seaboard, and in my opinion, it makes it a lot more usable. In fact, if we look at the side here, we've also got additional sliders which allow you to dial in the amount of sensitivity, because obviously when you're playing something like this, accuracy is something that you're going to learn. I must confess, when I first saw the ROLI Seaboard Grand, I think it must have been 2 or 3 years ago now, at a local studio. It was there for a sort of technology preview. I did find it hard to imagine how it would fit into one's life. I mean, A, it was very, very expensive back then. The price was fixed. It's come down a considerable amount since then. And B, there was nothing really you could do with it. Since then, there's been quite a lot of advancement in MPE or 5D technology, because you've got the Equator synth that comes with the Seaboard Rise. You've also got other synthesizers that respond to polyphonic aftertouch and allow you to have pitch bend per note, which is effectively what this allows you to do. So let's take a look at these dimensions in full. We've got velocity, or strike as they call it. We've got pressure, which is called pressure. We've got slide, which is the travel along the key or across the keyboard. And we've also got lift. Lift is, I guess, release velocity. So here, I release slowly, I get more release to the note. The faster I release the key. Additionally, there is glide, which is on a per note basis up to 10. Each note can be pitch bent effectively into whatever it's doing. These are all mappable in the Equator synth via this section down here, which gives you the way that you can route it. I'll just get the torch on this because it's quite hard to see. Here are the connections. We've got a 9 to 12 volt DC input, so it'll take a variety of inputs if you haven't got the power supply that actually comes with it handy. And this both powers the keyboard but will also charge the battery, because there's an internal battery in here, which means that you can run this wirelessly, because it also has wireless Bluetooth MIDI for connecting to iOS and other enabled devices. There's also a USB-A port, which I was rather hoping meant you could use this as a hub. So for instance, plug in an extra MIDI controller to have those extra knobs or whatever. Sadly not. This just supplies power. When it's plugged into the power supply, this will output power so you could charge your iOS device if you're connected wirelessly. There's also a USB-B port, which is what I'm using to hook up to the computer and the DAW. Finally, there is a standard sustain pedal input as well. So I have to say, construction-wise, it really does feel nice and solid. It's got a heft to it, and it feels very kind of chunky. I mean, obviously there's no moving parts on it, so it doesn't. There's nothing there to feel rubbishy, I suppose. One other thing that's really cool, you see the box over there, the sort of monolithic 2001 type solid thing. It is a thing of beauty. Whoever designed the packaging should get some sort of award, I think. It's really nicely done. In fact, it also comes with this soft case, which gives you protection, and you can just chuck it in over your shoulder and walk around with it, you know, and look pretty cool, because obviously it's an expensive item. Nice luxury bit of extra stuff. And once you've installed the system, it comes with a registration card. You go online and you register your Seaboard. You then get the ROLI Seaboard Rise control panel or dashboard, and this shows you the data all the points of contact. So you can see the blue is velocity, the circle is pressure, up and down is the slide, and then glide is happening this way. And you can affect the curves for all of these different parameters. And in fact, if we look over here at the left hand side, these give you real-time control over the sensitivity of those, which is actually really handy for when you're learning, because sometimes, you know, you might not want the pitch to be tracking super fast because, you know, you're still learning how to do it. Additionally, when you go into the other mode, which is CC mode, it means that these will all transmit their own assignable control values. So that allows you to set it up for working with other synthesizers that maybe just don't speak pure 5D touch. It does require a lot of channels. In multi-mode, we're transmitting in 2 to 16, which seems to be the default setting, and we can set whether it sets channel pressure or poly aftertouch. Obviously that's going to increase the amount of data that's going out. The other thing that comes as part of the package is the Equator synth. This is it here. It's actually a really brilliant soft synth, I have to say. The sounds are matched specifically to work with the expressive capabilities of the Rise. You get 2 sample slots, which can be multi-samples, each with their own filter, 3 multi-wave oscillators, an FM section, 2 LFOs, 5 envelopes, and a whole bunch of effects, which are actually really impressive. I don't know who's done the sound design on this, but they've done a really good job of matching these two things up. It's only available to work with the Rise. It's not separately available, and I'm sure some people will be gagging to get hold of it, because it actually is a really powerful synthesizer and really does match beautifully with the Seaboard Rise. Now, in terms of playing technique, you do have to adapt somewhat. So now if I just play this regular triad, you'll see that when I slide my hand up here, my wrist is starting to be contorted into sort of quite a natural position. You can change the sensitivity to this so that you get more happening on the shorter travel of the note, which is quite handy. I've also got, we come here, I'm using my thumb to slide, but I could go here, or I could put my other finger here. And again, you do find, so then if I come back here and maybe I slide down, I'm having to give my hand quite a workout. I'll just switch the light off there. So you do find that you do have to adapt quite a bit. In terms of sensitivity though, you don't actually have to hit the keyboard all that hard. I would say it would probably suit a keyboard player who perhaps doesn't have a really pounding technique, because the curves are stored per patch in the Seaboard Rise. If I flip it to another preset, but you can also see that it's possible for me to vibrato an individual note. And again, if we come back down to the overall side, I can dial in the amount of control I want there. So now, so I can take it right down so that it becomes like a glissando. Obviously, you find accuracy improves with the more playing you have. I'm not a great keyboard player to start with, but I mean, you've probably seen demos of people who are really flying all over this. I mean, obviously, Jordan Rudess is one of them, but there's a fantastic Italian chap as well who does some fantastic demos. And he's playing stuff from Contact and that side of things where you can get set up very complex matching. And that's the thing about this. Yeah, it's great with the Seaboard Equator synth, which is dedicated for this particular purpose. What's it like with other applications? Because obviously, if you're going to spend this much money on a keyboard controller, you might want it to do some other duties as well, right? So if I now come to Reaper, I've just got a drum part in here. So literally what I've done is I'm mapping, you know, as it would on a normal keyboard, but I've done something very slightly different. So I've enabled the MIDI input, but what I'm doing is I'm just map input to channel 1, which is most DAWs will route incoming MIDI to the MIDI channel of the selected instrument. So literally it's just battery in here and I'm playing this little groove. So I'll just put this groove in. This is just Reaper, so I'll just play this. Okay. So now I'm coming up to my other channel, and on this I've got a instance of Rise, which I've got this sound, which is an orchestral kind of, and I'm sliding that note. I think that's lovely actually. So I'm just running that because this is just an, I think this is the AU version. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting my input to be from the Seaboard Rise all channels. So I'm just going to play the groove and play along. And go into record, and we'll see what it records. So as you can see, we got quite a lot of data here. We've got the pitch data, the note data. Then if we view event list, we've got other events here. We've got pitch bend, we've got CC74, poly aftertouch, a lot of data going on in here, but it's all recorded and plays back fine. We've got our piece and it's recorded. All my stuff, including the mistakes. So in terms of performance, I mean, obviously there's some notes in there that are sort of in the middle, and that's actually quite interesting to my ears because it takes it away from the perfection and the grid a little bit, and it adds a little bit of expression and performance to it. The only thing I will say is my hand is starting to get quite tired because of the stretches I'm doing between the fingers. I think you can it will require a little bit of adaptation of technique, definitely. However, having said that, I think there's a couple of things that they could add in terms of modes that might make this a little bit easier to play for beginners and also offer some extra solutions. And I'm thinking specifically you could perhaps map, like say this area or this area, disable the X, Y and the slide on the keys so that you could be playing the keys here and then just have this area as a global mod, if you like, so that would open the filter or whatever it is mapped to for all notes, and that would add vibrato for all notes. So you'd have a manual vibrato. Now obviously this is working via the computer. I mean, the downside to this is there is no direct way of getting MIDI out of this into hardware unless you're using Bluetooth MIDI, and you'd be going into the iPad, and then I guess you could pass that through to another hardware MIDI interface. It's very much geared towards working with a computer. And that said, you know, it does have the downsides of no splits, no layering, that sort of thing, where if you wanted to use this as your only keyboard, I think you'd be in trouble because it wouldn't maybe perform those functions that you wanted in terms of a live performance tool. But it maybe for certain sounds and certain solo instruments, and where you want just that higher degree of expression, I mean, this definitely gives you that. I mean, I think it's definitely something that when you try it, you instinctively start to feel like, oh, actually, I can see how I would play something different using this keyboard to a regular keyboard. And that's part of the thing. It seems to be the people who are interested in it are people who may be composers, who are using a lot of keyboard sounds, a lot of sounds, and it means that they can impart more expression into their parts, whereas ordinarily they might have had to do that with meticulous sort of automation, lane editing and all of that sort of thing. You can actually perform something much more organic using this method. Right, so now let's get into the Bluetooth MIDI side of things. I've got an iPad 2 here running OS 9.2.3. Make sure that the Bluetooth is switched on, which it is indeed. Now we don't connect here. What we do in this particular instance is I come back out, I switch the ROLI Seaboard on without a USB plugged in, so this is now in fully wireless mode with no cables connected. I don't know if you can see that, but that light is flashing, which shows that it's waiting for a Bluetooth connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the Moog Model 15 synth, which is the new app from Moog, which is actually pretty cool. Not now. I'm going to go into settings, MIDI. I'm just going to scroll down and look for Bluetooth MIDI. So now I can see I've got my Rise 49, which I'm selecting there. It's now connecting. It is connected. I'm going to use that as an input. And what I'm also going to do is I've got the digital output here, which is going to go on USB, which is going into an iConnect MIDI 4+, which is going to go into my computer just so that we can monitor it. So I'll let that pick up. So now I've basically got, if I put this here so it's not quite so on the keyboard, I can now, if I come out of settings, now playing wireless MIDI into the iPad, which is now working in MPE mode. I'll just double check, I'll just show you the settings that we have to do for that. So just to double check that, what we've got to do is we go into input channel mode. So instead of selecting as channel, I go to the bottom and I select MPE, which is the other word for multi-dimensional polyphonic expression. So I'm selecting MPE here. I'm also setting the pitch bend range to be 48 because that seems to be the one that works best, rather than unchecking load from preset. So now I'm getting pressure, getting a little bit of audio glitching there, but I think that's just because I haven't set up the sample rates properly. But you can see, so now I could, if I wanted to, I suppose if there were enough instruments, and there are a number of instruments that will respond to polyphonic and 5D touch, I could be using my iPad as the sound source, have no wires, have this somewhere else, or indeed I could connect over Bluetooth, over MIDI if I've got OS 10.10.1, I think, and above. I could have my computer out of the way and just basically be, you know, free as a bird to walk around and be that guy who walks around with a keyboard kind of guy. So I guess once you've got it into your iOS device and then MIDI over Wi-Fi, there's ways you can move it around, particularly in OS X. You can do network MIDI, you can connect it in all sorts of ways. This thing is not cheap, you know, it's a luxury item. £950, dollar price will scroll below, and it's not going to give you all of the things you might expect if you're spending that much money on a master keyboard. You don't get splits and zones and layers and that kind of thing unless you do it in software. There might be a way that you can configure things, layering up instruments in the instrument side. But what you do get is a very powerful, expressive instrument that allows you to play in a unique way, in a way that means you interact with the sound much more viscerally. I mean, we've all had those, just a regular MIDI keyboard and big software instruments where you just press a note and, you know, it's fantastic, but there's not as much of an interaction. With this, you get this kind of organic, visceral connection with the sound source, and that is something that is actually quite liberating in many ways. It means you play in a different way. Of course, if you can't afford the 49 key, there's the 25 key, which is 585 UK pounds, dollar price will scroll. So there is a way to get in, and you may not need a keyboard of this size. What it does give you is just access to, like I say, a way of being very expressive. Of course, I think where things could get really interesting is if you hook this up to analog kit. But there's no easy way to do it. I think perhaps there might be a route if you used the Expert Sleepers FH1, which is a USB MIDI host in a rack, and you'd have to do some clever programming to route everything in there. But that may be something that's coming along in the future, and that would be really interesting, the way that you could then use it for expressing for, say, a modular or a synthesizer setup. But overall, I'm actually very impressed with the ROLI. When I first was exposed to it, I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. I thought it might just be, oh yeah, it's going to be, you know, a rich man's plaything. And yes, it is expensive, but actually the expression that you can add in your playing and the ways that it takes you, I think it's actually worth considering if you're looking to kind of break outside of the standard keyboard interface and you want to get a bit more expression. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. This has been SonicLAB, the ROLI Seaboard Rise 49. Please do subscribe. There'll be plenty of more videos along soon.